Amid those attacks on the Strait of Hormuz today, Emmanuel Macron, the French president, is calling on leaders of G7 countries to work together to re-establish freedom of navigation in the region as soon as possible. With me to talk about this, Philip Turle, our foreign affairs editor. Philip, explain to us then what Macron wants to happen in the Strait and why it actually might be rather difficult.
Okay, well, first of all, we all know, having watched the news over the last few days, how important the Strait of Hormuz is as the world centre of oil shipments, like 20% of all oil shipments going through there. And the fact that they're not going through is pushing prices up. That is the bottom line. And it's not only pushing prices up around Europe, in the Gulf region, but it's also indirectly pushing prices up in the United States, because the United States also, even though they're one of the biggest producers of oil in the world, they still import oil, which then is refined and made into petroleum for vehicles. So this is having a knock-on effect all over the place. And in fact, it's not good news for Iran either, because Iran also uses the Strait of Hormuz for its own oil exportations. So that's the bottom line as far as that's concerned. What Emmanuel Macron is saying is, well, look, we need to get the Strait of Hormuz open and we need to liberate maritime traffic, because if we don't, this is going to drag the situation even further downhill. He's proposing to send in more frigates to the area. The Charles de Gaulle is already there. But the problem for Emmanuel Macron is that all of this is with a view to when the war comes to an end and when it's going to be safe to try to accompany shipping through the Strait of Hormuz to make sure that they're not any ship there is not going to be attacked. In the meantime, the G7 member states have been meeting via video conference today, and they've all agreed to up the amount of oil reserves that are made immediately available to the different countries in a bid to stop this price increase that we saw just a couple of days ago, where oil prices went up to almost $120 a barrel. They've now come down well below that again, but it is possible that this could go the other way even further next time if this war doesn't come to an end anytime soon. And I think that's what everybody is worried about here, that, well, there doesn't seem to be an end game. We don't really know where all this is going to end up. And the most important thing is that the more that oil prices go up, the more people are going to have to pay, the more that's going to have a knock-on effect on opinion polls against political parties, those running the different countries, and even on President Trump. That's why there's this effort by everybody to try and say, well, look, we have to try to make some kind of effort to get these oil supplies up and running again.
Well, as you say, the key question in all of this is, when is the conflict going to come to an end? And Donald Trump has been speaking to Axios today, to American media, and once again he said, look, this is nearly over in his point of view.
Yeah, this is the second time that Donald Trump has said this, saying it's up to me to decide when this war ends, and there is almost nothing left to hit in Iran anymore, so it's almost over. We're ahead on our objectives, but we don't know what those objectives are, Nadia. That's the big question here. And it doesn't appear that the White House has got an exit strategy or knows exactly which direction it's going in. I think there are several elements that we can deduct from what Donald Trump is saying. Going back to what I was saying just a minute ago, I think Donald Trump is worried about the effect that all of this is having on the oil markets and on the stock market. He's much more worried about the unpopularity he will receive back home if those prices don't come down again. He's got the midterm elections coming up in November. There's not a massive support amongst American people for this war. Only 41% of Americans say that Donald Trump was right to go and start launching attacks against the Iranians. He needs to find a way out of this war, but there are not very many possibilities. One of them could be to send in a commando unit. He ruled that out, saying we're not sending in boots on the ground, but there again, the door has been left open to that. Or he could say, well, let's get back to negotiating. We want to negotiate a nuclear deal, but that is something that looks incredibly unlikely right now, and the regime in Iran has made it pretty clear that they're not willing to come back to the negotiating table because of all the damage that they've just received over the past week or so. So many are saying Donald Trump has totally miscalculated the Iranian response to the Israeli and the American bombing raids, and they're now imposing blackmail over shipping through the Strait of Hormuz, while the world is trying to find a way through this to stop the spiralling prices from going back up again, but no clear definition as to where this is all going and how this war is going to come to an end.